All right, here we go. We are ready. We are live. Okay, I'm very excited. Well, good morning, good afternoon, whatever time of day it is where you are joining us for today's webinar. Welcome. My name is Matt Guevara, and I'm the Executive Director at the International Network of Children's Ministry, and I am so glad you are here today with us to talk about an incredibly important topic, a vital topic for every church, every children's ministry leader, regardless of where you are or how many children and families you serve. Today's topic is improving child safety in your children's ministry. And so we got a lot to cover, okay, with our dear friends and partners, some experts in the field who have joined us today. Before I introduce them and just turn things over to them for the remainder of the webinar, what I wanted to do is introduce you in the chat. So in your chat box, that's where you can ask questions that will hold for some Q&A time at the end. Comment, interact with one another, maybe even share some ideas that you've been experiencing or things you've been experiencing in the life of your church. And so please use that chat box. In fact, we're going to choose one of the people who chats today. We're going to choose one of you and give you a pretty cool gift, you know, so we're actually excited about this. A copy of Jim Weidman's latest book, Tweetable Leadership, and this is unlike any, this is not like a copy you could just order off the shelf, because this one is actually signed by Jim, okay? So we're going to send this right to you. We're going to choose one of the folks that chat, so let's see, I don't know if anybody's out there. Maybe right now you could just be chatting where you're from. Just say hi and tell us where you're from. That would be incredible. All right, I'll go ahead and do that. Matt and Chicago. All right, boom. Okay, so that's how you use the chat. Make sure that you do that, and again, use chat for questions and for comments and just interaction. We want to encourage you to do that, and again, who knows, we could be sending this to your door. All right, well, for today's webinar, Improving Child Safety in Your Children's Ministry, we are joined by two incredible experts in this area. They're from our wonderful partners at KidCheck. You've seen KidCheck in INCM's dispatch box at our events, conferences, and emails. What I love about them is they bring fun, okay? They bring a lot of fun and expertise to this critical ministry area. I'm going to introduce them to you. I'm going to turn things over to them until we come back at the end for some question and answer. And again, just remember to put those questions in the chat. Oh, wow, look at you guys go. I mean, you guys are digging this book. All right, Dawn, Spokane. Is it Spokane or Spokane? I don't know. I don't speak Spokane. All right. Let me introduce to you our two experts, all right? First, Alex Smith, the founder and CEO of KidCheck, providers of secure children's check-in systems. Alex is a data security and child safety expert, church safety team leader, and former police officer. He often speaks on the topic of child safety, so we're welcoming Alex today, as well as Angela Luton. All right, Angela is the face behind the blogs, the child safety podcasts, and social media outreach for KidCheck, who are the providers, again, of that secure children's check-in system. Angela's focus in recent days is on the latest child safety research and trends, and she's just passionate about helping churches understand the importance of child protection. So welcome, Alex and Angela. Let me turn things over to you guys. So glad you're with us today.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, good morning, Matt. Thank you very much. So, actually, a couple of things before we get started, and thanks for that great introduction, Matt. That was really very nice. Angela, I'm so glad to have her with me today. She is our resident expert for child safety and security. Has done a ton of research on how to identify predators and predator profiling, as well as child safety and security policies for your church. We actually have a follow-up webinar to this one that Angela does as well on helping your church identify and develop a child protection policy, which is a really key aspect that we'll touch on a little bit later. But you're also you're a certified, I don't know if you knew this, but you're a nationally certified trainer with an organization called Darkness to Light, which specializes in helping organizations become more aware of the threat of predators that are out there, and how to actually implement policy changes to secure their facilities and that sort of a thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're a great organization, and Darkness to Light is an abuse prevention organization, and I speak for them nationally a little bit and talk a little bit about policies for organizations who are child-centered and child-focused. So, yeah, thanks for that introduction, Alex. I appreciate
absolutely.
it.
Well, we have a lot to cover today, so we're going to dive right in. But before we do that, I just want to say personally thank you to everybody that's out there listening to us right now that is involved in children's ministry. I've got five kids. Holy cow, I have 5 kids.
It makes me exhausted.
Yeah,
just thinking
it
about
is. It's tiring. And so I just so much appreciate all that you guys do to help foster the spiritual relationships that my kids have, and just help them grow to be the people that God wants them to be. And that's just it's a largely unsung job, but I know the amount of work and effort and energy that goes into that is just huge at times. So thank you everybody for all the effort and energy you put in.
Absolutely, and I just want to add that it's such an honor to be a part of this great community. I mean, we've met and talked to so many people that are just amazing at what they do and the callings that they have, and it really is an honor for us to be working with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're going to jump into our first slide here. So this first slide, this is kind of just some really kind of scary statistics that are out there about what the environment looks like, what the threat looks like to the kids that are in your children's ministry. We have a very large population of registered sex offenders in the United States, at least 750,000 that are registered out there, and just infinitely more that are not registered that we don't know about, the folks that have fallen through the cracks. It's an estimate of 100,000 or so every year fail to report as a registered sex offender, and the number of kids that are abused every year, and like the statistic of 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 4 boys will be sexually abused before the age of 18. That's just staggering. That's staggering. It's and the numbers just continue to climb as we go. And we don't want to put this up there to frighten anybody. These numbers and statistics aren't there to to try and scare you off. It's just there to say, hey, there is a real and growing threat out there within the children's ministry and a child's life in general. But churches tend to be one of the #1 areas that predators will go and prey upon because a lot of times they get easy access to the kids within those ministries. And we're going to talk a lot about things you can do to help prevent that as well. But I know one of the statistics that's not on here that is the most surprising to me is that if you look at the training that seminaries and colleges give to folks that are wanting to go into full-time ministry as a children's pastor, we focus so much time and effort and energy on how do you help a child mature in their relationship with Christ, and how do we share the gospel effectively with them, and the kind of the nuts and bolts of the actual ministry. But it's something like less than 10%. 1%. Oh, I'm sorry, less than 1% of folks that come through a seminary-type program get any kind of training in terms of security and how to watch out for the active predator within your ministry. So I'm glad you're here today, and I'm glad that we're able to share this information with you. So when you're looking at your ministry, I know one of the things that is oftentimes overwhelming. You look at what typically has to happen in children's ministry on a Sunday morning. It's things like, hey, what kind of snacks are we going to offer? What's the curriculum going to be like? Who's going to substitute for the second grade teacher that's out sick?
Volunteering day.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that we don't think about a lot is security. So I have a lot of folks that'll come to me and say, so what do I do about that, Alex? I'm not security minded, I'm not security trained. How do I implement security within my church? And honestly, the easiest thing that you can do, the #1 thing that we can actually go for, let me get my slide up here, is to go find help. And the #1 way to do that is to find folks within your church that can help you develop and establish a security team. I think it's something like 30% of the churches that are in the United States actually have active security teams within their church. But this is a great resource for you as a children's pastor that needs some help in terms of identifying what the access points look like and security policies and procedures. Because when something goes wrong, you want to be able to have somebody there quickly that has a law enforcement or military background that can kind of stand in the gap for you and help make sure that your kids are well protected.
And one thing to note also, for the year of 2016, church security is the fastest growing ministry. that within churches today. So church security teams are at the forefront of what people are thinking about in terms of new ministries for their organizations. So, I mean, that's really great news for us, especially when we present this information, because it's good to see that there's more of an emphasis put on helping not only just the entire church, but also children's ministry be more secure.
Yeah, absolutely. So if your church doesn't have a security team and you want to go talk to the church staff about, hey, maybe we need to look at building one of these, there's definitely a right way and a wrong way to do that. The first thing that you want to do is you want to help have your church staff identify the most trusted law enforcement individual that you can find within your congregation. Yeah. Either law enforcement or somebody that has some kind of military background, so somebody that's security minded. So once you identify that person, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be really excited to help out in an area that God has given them talents and gifts and abilities that you would never think a police officer would be able to help in that way in a church, but now it's needed. So go ahead and approach that person. One thing that's really important, though, that they need to make sure that they understand is that when they're a police officer out in the field, it's to protect and serve. That's their primary goal. But in a church, those two goals are reversed. It's to serve and protect. So there's got to be a good balance in there to know that, hey, I need to be, having a protection role, but I'm also there to serve the people primarily that are attending my church and make sure that I'm not interfering or impeding in the congregation in any way. And that's why it's important to find that really trusted person to kind of head this up. The number one mistake from there that most churches will make at some point is they start advertising in the bulletin for their children's or for their actual security team. And what'll happen if you do that? These are the folks that will end up coming to your first security team meeting. I guarantee it's
Look at that bazooka.
Yeah.
Good grief.
Yeah. People that want to be the armchair warrior on Sunday and hey, I've got a concealed weapons permit and I want to go do my duty for my church, and people generally with a really good heart and a really strong willingness to do this, but folks that may be a little overzealous in terms of wanting to portray the protection side rather than the service side. So the idea is you want to not advertise for this, but let the person that you have identified as heading up that ministry, that trusted law enforcement individual, let them go and approach the other people that he knows within the congregation that have law enforcement background and can actually build the team on his own. And what you really want to do is, sorry, my slides keep. There we go. You really want to find folks that are true professionals in this space. So here's a picture of 3 different security team members that they blend in with the rest of the background. They're there. They have good equipment. Obviously, they've got some radios on. They're folks that know exactly what to look for and what's going on, rather than just sort of the armchair warrior.
And I think one thing to comment on that is that a lot of times your security team will be an extension of your church mission. I know that there are some pastors who don't want security anywhere near their where they're speaking, but they like them sort of in the background. Then there are some who want them close by. So that team will really be an extension of sort of the outreach and mission of your overall church. And so each team is very individual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I had the opportunity to serve on my church's security team a number of years ago, and we actually had a split team. We had some folks that were kind of very undercover, if you will, but close by the pastor. So most folks had no idea that we were even there. Then we had others that had security shirts on and would kind of watch over the offering as it was passed around, and stood there with children's ministry as kids were being checked in and out and that kind of thing.
I think having that mix is really important of visibility, and then those that are sort of blending in, as you mentioned. I think that really does go a long way.
Okay, so find that trusted law enforcement individual to help get this started. Don't advertise on for the security team. Let them kind of pick their own team and figure out exactly what they want to do. As a children's pastor, you have to keep in mind that this team, though, as it's implemented, this is your number one resource if there's ever an incident. If there's a parent that doesn't have custody of a child that tries to pick them up from church, or any kind of issue that comes up, they're your go-to. And so you really want to get to know them individually and personally. So know who they are, know their names, And then make sure that you've got some good equipment within your church. So especially radios. The security team needs to have radios, as well as yourself and a couple of other folks within the children's ministry. So if there is if there's an issue that comes up, it should be a quick code word onto the radio, and everybody knows exactly what to do.
That's right.
And kind of come to your aid.
What about the size of security teams? I mean, we have a lot of startups and church plants that are much smaller. What are your thoughts on scaling the size of the team based on the size of your congregation?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think with a really, really small church, if you look at the size of your organization and say, well, I really don't even have anybody that has law enforcement background. The first step to do then is just contact the local police department and just say, hey, I'm interested in bolstering security within my organization, within my church. Are there folks that can come out and just give me some tips and advice until the church grows to the point where you do have that individual they can kind of step up and take over the team.
That's great.
One last thing on here, so the bottom website link, cppssite.com. This is a great resource. If you're looking for information on how to build security teams or just getting some additional information. This is the Center for Personal Protection and Safety. That's the name of this organization. We've worked with them in the past. They're up in Spokane, Washington. And these guys, they actually have a whole division of their company that just does nothing but helping churches specifically in terms of building security teams and security team training. They do workshops for security teams and really kind of help identify their role more specifically, and it's a great resource. So if you don't have a team or want additional information on how to build a team, that's a great place to go.
And I noticed the last time I was out that they have some great videos. We don't cover active shooter in this particular presentation, but they have a lot of information on multi-casualty and active shooter type scenarios, which is a very big topic right now for church security teams.
Yeah.
So they're a great resource with lots of good videos.
So if you're building a security team, and this is a great place to point them to get the training that they need to kind of get started. Okay. So let's talk about facilities. Facilities. This is a kind of a tricky topic to talk about because 9 times out of 10 the facilities that we're in as a church, the children's ministry didn't have a lot of input in terms of the facility type and what it looks like, and we sort of have to kind of make do with what we've got. But there's some very practical things we can talk about in order to make your facility more secure and just a better overall fit. The first one is that a lot of times in a church, the children's ministry, the church wants to think about putting kids into the back of the building, so sort of away from the main areas, the main foyer or the sanctuary, just to keep noise and that kind of stuff at a keep that at a minimum. And that's kind of the wrong way to look at it. When you're looking at security, the more eyes that you have on your facilities, the more times you have people walking around, the more visible your area is. That becomes a much more secure location instead of being more of a threat or more accessible to somebody that wants to do something bad. So if you have the option to keep your classrooms in a very, very visible area, that is ideal. You really want to keep them up front, if at all possible. In fact, my church, we actually had a row of offices that was right across from the main sanctuary, and we converted those offices into the actual nursery. So we had all the kids were dropped off right there in the front. And then when the service started, we used a belt stanchion, which is like on a bank teller line kind of a thing, to actually block that area off. So once the service was started, if there was somebody that was in that area that didn't belong there, they really stood out because they're on the other side of the stanchions, and allowed us as a team to kind of activate and go ask them what they're doing. And
I like that suggestion because it's not costly. So those belt stanchions aren't that expensive.
No,
so you can use different tools like that to help promote security, and they're not over the top in terms of budget.
Yeah, I think the belt stanchions I saw 2 for $50 or $60 on Amazon, so they're not expensive.
That's great.
If your classrooms don't have windows, try and keep the doors open. Again, we want more visibility, more eyes on what's going on. Certainly, you want to use child gates to keep the escape artists from being able to get out of the room, if you will. But that's a really nice thing. We actually had an elderly gentleman that offered to come and cut windows in all of our doors. So we actually put a piece of glass in there so that because the way the setup was, it didn't quite work out well, but it was great to be able to open that still back up and still have eyes on what's going on within the nurseries.
It's nice to be able to retrofit your area too, because some of the churches that we've spoken with, they're in rented buildings or they're temporary facilities or, until a new one gets built or, in transition or however that works. So it's great to have suggestions to retrofit that area.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next thing to keep in mind is you really want to control access and who has access to the children's ministry area, if at all possible. And that goes hand in hand with limiting the number of entry points into your children's area. So if at all possible, like in our setup, we've got for the elementary area, we put up a temporary wall and just a little movable wall, but basically made 2 doors, one entry and one exit. And then we have our check-in system. We have somebody that's checking to make sure that kids are checked in appropriately with the actual child name badges at the entry. And then guardians aren't allowed back, once the kids kind of go into the children's ministry area. And then at the exit, we have somebody on the security team that's actually checking the guardian name tags or the guardian receipts to make sure that they all match up with the child name tags. So if you can, you want to make sure that you've got a controlled flow of people through your children's ministry area, and again, more eyes on what's going on.
That makes a lot of sense.
So here's an example of kind of the 2 different, like the belted stanchions over on the left and then the movable walls that we've used on the right. The movable walls are a little bit more expensive, but again, great for being able to kind of block off access. And these are both just available on Amazon. They're not expensive in any way. So
that's great.
All right, this is my favorite part of my presentation. So medical emergencies are something that you definitely want to have a plan for, and this is something you want to talk with your security team about. If there's a medical emergency, I mean, let's face it, we're dealing with children and kids, and so medical emergencies happen. So let me show you my medical emergency here. This is my favorite picture. This actually is my church, and the young gentleman he's no longer young. That's my son over on the right, and he was about 6 years old or so in this picture. But you'll notice the large welt right between his eyes.
That's quite the goose egg.
And the large dent in the pole. So in the children's ministry area, we have this one large room, and it has one pole right through the middle of it. And of course, my son was running full.
His head found it.
Yeah, he found it. It was square between the eyes. He was running full steam, not paying attention, and just ran right into that thing. And so I got the call on the radio. I was actually working on the security team and got the call to come check it out. And fortunately, his head didn't bleed. It was just swelled up pretty large there. But the most frustrating thing was when we were trying to to kind of treat him after he stopped crying and that kind of stuff. Nobody knew where the first aid kit was. We had no idea. And that was a little bit of a frustration that like, hey, there's potentially there could be blood, there could be other things going on here, and we need to be able to treat this, and no one had any clue where that was.
I think that's really common because it's sort of the last detail that you think about when you're getting everything ready for service that day is where is the first aid kit, and does everybody know where its location is? Yeah, I think that's very common.
So make sure you've got a good and well-stocked first aid kit, and that everybody knows where it is. You can buy plastic placard signs from Amazon again for $7 or $8 that say first aid, that have that stuff clearly marked. We actually did find our first aid kit. It was in a filing cabinet that was locked in the I think it was like the 2nd grade classroom in the back corner. It was someplace just like no one had
really
any idea.
Abstract.
Yeah, totally abstract.
Ever have known.
But we definitely made some changes to how we actually display that. So make sure you think that through. Make sure you've got a freshly stocked first aid kit because again, they're kids. They're gonna have accidents and incidents. So make sure you've got a really good system for identifying allergies. And I can't stress this enough. Angela, I know your kids have got some allergy challenges.
And it's the allergy thing in classrooms is growing. A lot of churches today won't serve snacks. We're required to bring our own snack just because of the variation of allergies that exists. And the hard thing is that you never know how children are going to respond to an allergy, or if they just have an intolerance, meaning they could, get a small rash, where others can actually go into anaphylactic shock, or potentially need an EpiPen or something like that. So it's just dealing with allergies is so challenging when you have multiple kids with multiple allergies and multiple responses, and it can be really difficult. And it's hard for parents when we have to drop our kids off and we know that they have more of an anaphylactic response to that. Who's going to know this? How are they going to track it?
Right.
We can tell the teacher and the helper, our children are, allergic to these things, but unless they have something that visually reminds them not to feed this child a specific, allergen, they probably won't remember. And it gets really hard to manage. But I think having a good system for that, of course, the church that I go to, we have on the badges exactly what the allergies they have, and the badges come with a more of a different color, so the children stand out. And it's really important because we have had some examples, and I think you've had an example in your church.
Yeah, we actually had an issue with it was a 2-year-old infant or 2-year-old toddler that was given a peanut-based cookie and went into anaphylactic shock, and the actual volunteer had no idea how to even identify that. So the child was kind of crying and really fussy for almost 45 minutes before the parents showed up, and the worker didn't think anything was amiss except the child was just kind of throwing a fit. But mom and dad immediately knew what was going on. They got the child to the hospital. The doctor said the child had about half an hour or so before her airway would have closed up. And the shocking thing was that it was actually the senior pastor's granddaughter that was in there. So when we look at our children's ministry areas and say, well, I know everybody, I know what's going on. There's some things that you just can't know, and so we want to make sure we have systems in place to help prevent us from getting bit by that. So if you have a check-in system, make sure it has some kind of way of identifying allergies and medical information, or you can use little colored stickers, or whatever you need to do to make sure that if a child has an allergy, a parent has a way of communicating that effectively to you, because that can be a really big deal. Make sure if there is, or I should say when there is an incident, if a child hurts themselves or something like my son hitting a pole, make sure you've got a way to document that, both with taking photos as well as storing the record of what exactly happened. So you want to make sure you've got all that captured. If you guys are doing any kind of events, specifically like Vacation Bible School or anything like that, make sure you get medical releases from your parents. Again, because you have you're caring for a child for an extended period of time, so the risk of an injury continues to climb, and you want to make sure that that you can access those releases remotely. So the last thing I've seen this done well a couple of times, where you can have all your medical releases in some kind of a kit, and then you grab that and run out to go to the hospital or with the ambulance or whatever. But to be able to access those documents electronically is even better. You don't even have to think about it. You can go ahead and take care of the injury and get the child to a medical facility, and then pull up the actual release form on a computer in the hospital even, and just say, here's the form, here's the parent signature, go ahead and treat the child. So you make sure that you get care to the child as fast as possible.
That makes sense.
So, and then lastly, you want to make sure you train all of your volunteers in CPR. This should be kind of a normal onboarding process. If you do this quarterly or biannually, in most churches there's somebody that is a trained CPR trainer that oftentimes will just do it for free. Just say, I'll bring in my stuff. Get all the volunteers together. We used to have annual CPR training for both the child ministry workers and volunteers as well as the security team, and we'd all just train together. So it was a great opportunity not only for us to get to know each other, but also just to see how each other reacts and who's comfortable in an emergency situation and know how to respond.
I like when they incorporate it into the actual onboarding process for new volunteers. So, if you're a new volunteer within a children's ministry, you know that that's going to be just part of your initial training before you're in the classroom or doing whatever it is that you're doing. I've seen that done, and I think that works really well.
Yeah. Okay, so here's an example of a couple of different placards that I found. Again, these are just from Amazon, but just an overview of child CPR. You can post this right next to your first aid kit arrow. But just a couple of bucks, and this can really, it can save somebody's life if there's a big enough incident.
I like the big red sign. That's helpful when you're trying to find
Oh man, I sure wish we had that above that filing cabinet that day. My goodness. So let's talk about emergency planning. Emergency planning is something that is just absolutely critical. And again, there's a right way and a wrong way to do this. The absolute wrong way is to be working on developing your plan during an emergency. When there is a fire, it is the wrong time to think about how do I respond to a fire. This is something that developing this plan really should be done in conjunction with your security team, so that everybody knows exactly the plan and how to handle any kind of a natural disaster, fire, flood, whatever it is, or any kind of medical emergency. How do we handle security? How do we handle getting kids back to parents? How do we handle notification? All those kinds of things. You really want to be able to think that through with your team and think outside the box. Sometimes you have to look at resources that are beyond just the physical premise that your church is located in for resources that are maybe right across the street or right down the street.
One thing that you mentioned when we were speaking to another organization was laminated lists of emergency contact.
Mm-hmm.
So, how to turn off the water, the electricity, who to call for different things. I really like that suggestion because having a laminated list somewhere that someone can just pull up immediately and know who to call, I think is so helpful. And you mentioned that before, and I thought, wow, that is such a great idea, because who has time to sort of search for the information? Yeah. And having numbers on there like the non-emergency police number and some of those things are just really great, and I like the laminated form of it where someone can just grab it and take it with them.
I actually saw a great suggestion just a couple of weeks ago where inside of the actual individual classrooms within children's ministry, they had a little like a tear-off sheet almost for different types of emergencies. If there's a fire, the actual volunteer could just go right to that list right next to the door and flip it open and say, okay, from this room, here's what you go do. And it's these 4 things. And if there's a flood, it was a different list. So it was just right there, very easy and convenient for them to see. So that even though they were trained in that, when there actually is an emergency and somebody might kind of blank out or panic for a minute, it just kind of helps pull them back together and say, okay, I need to get these 6 kids that I'm responsible for out to the parking lot, into this section. So to have that all identified and kind of figured out ahead of time just makes everything run so much smoother and just really, really increases the safety within that situation.
That's a brilliant idea.
I thought it was pretty good.
That's really a great idea.
So here's an example of kind of thinking outside of the normal bounds of your facility. So the building right there in the middle that says The Pursuit on it, that's actually my church. It's the blacktop building there. And we were looking at this and trying to figure out, okay, what do we do from an emergency situation if we have to get the kids out of the building? So if there's a fire or an earthquake or something like that. Well, you notice the parking lot around the building is actually very, very small. It's very narrow. There's not a lot of parking spaces out there. So we're trying to figure out, okay, how do we get the kids outside, out of the building, and still maintain security? Well, the building that is directly to the south there with the big white roof, that's in the bottom corner of your picture there, that's our local YMCA. And so we actually went over and talked to the managers at the YMCA. And you'll notice just to the left of their building, they have a big green tennis court. So we set up a plan with them that said, okay, if we need to move the kids out of our facility, we can have the security team meet in the children's ministry area, and we'll escort all the kids onto the tennis courts there. And the tennis courts actually have a nice big chain link fence around there, so the kids can all congregate in there. They can all play. We've got a lot of visibility on what's going on. We have controlled access to the actual courts themselves, and the check-in system, KidCheck, that we're using there, it's actually portable, so we can take our iPads out and actually do checkout through those gated access points, just like we were doing inside the building. So sometimes you have to look beyond, again, your facility and look at the resources around you to make sure you've got a good plan and that there's options out there for you.
That's a great suggestion, and I love the mobile checkout, how it can go with you.
Yeah, it made it really, really easy. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about some volunteer policy things. Volunteers is always a there's always kind of this tug of war between wanting to have good information on your volunteers and make sure that they're the right person for the job versus just getting a volunteer into some place because, hey, somebody volunteered and that's awesome. And I totally recognize that it's hard to do children's ministry, especially in attracting new volunteers and maintaining those. So there's definitely some tips on here that we're going to go through on policies that you can put in place to make sure your volunteers are the right people for the job. The first one is always, always, always do a background check on a volunteer. And make sure that if you're doing a background check, there's several different ways to do this. The one thing you want to make sure that you're doing is that wherever your volunteer is located, that you're doing a background check with the right information. Some states they'll publish all of the background check information on a statewide basis. Some states will do it on a county by county basis. Some will do it on a city by city basis. So if you're using a background check service, make sure that they're not just doing kind of a blanket, hey, we do federal and we do state, because state might not be enough. You may miss things unless they're doing state and county or state and city, depending on the policies within that state.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that's a question we get a lot, is what type of background check should I be doing? Where do I go? Do I do, a local one? Do I do a national one? And we've seen policies change based on, current events. Pennsylvania is a great example of a state that has put forth laws that are unprecedented when you're giving access to children. And so they require an FBI background check, an actual fingerprint scanning, and then it goes down from there, state and then local. So there's actually 4 different levels that a person has to go through in order to get access to children. And I personally believe that will start to set a precedence around other states for when we're allowing access to children, how people are going to have to be screened. So I'm glad that you mentioned that it's different for every state, and that our background system is somewhat fragmented. It's very different for everybody. So it's important that you learn sort of what your state requirements are and how you go about getting that done.
Yeah, make sure that if you're going to use a background check organization, make sure that they comply with the local state laws. So Pennsylvania is a great example. KidCheck is integrated with Protect My Ministry as our background check provider, so they actually do all the background checks for us. You just fill out your information in KidCheck and it runs against their databases. And we had to do a pretty major code change to support all the Pennsylvania laws. But it's a great thing, and that organization is very solid, because they know, state by state and county by county and city by city, what the right formula is to actually get all that information.
That's right.
All bubbled back up. One thing you do want to make sure you're doing, though, is repeat a background check, sometime in the 12 to 24 month range for all of your volunteers. This is very, very inexpensive insurance, because a lot of times, if somebody is convicted of something, it may not show up on a background check for months and months or years, depending on how it's reported back up. So make sure that you're doing this on a regular, recurring basis. A background check is like $10 or $12 per person, and that may be what saves your church if there's an incident that comes up, or even just an allegation of an incident. Having that as hey, we did our background check information, this came up as all clean, so we put in good faith to make sure this person was the right person, and you want to be able to have that in your back pocket. So one thing that you also want to do, this again is tough, because when we get somebody that raises their hand as a volunteer, as a children's pastor, it's easy to get excited. Oh, great! I finally got somebody to go watch 2-year-olds. This is awesome. But you definitely want to have some sort of a mandatory waiting period for anybody that raises their hand as a volunteer, and whether that's 6 weeks or 8 weeks or however long you feel is necessary as an organization. But that mandatory waiting period is great, because it gives you an opportunity to really kind of think through, hey, I'm able to see this person in church. What do I know about this person? Are they faithful? Is it the right fit? Are they going to be somebody that I would want to have around my kids? And it gives you kind of that time to process that information and just sort of pray about it and see what the Holy Spirit leads you to do. But and a lot of times too, if somebody is wanting to do something illegal within a children's area, and they see that there's a waiting period, having to make them wait may make them change their mind or decide that, hey, there's easier ways to gain access and leave.
It certainly is a deterrent, especially on the predator side. Yeah,
absolutely. One thing you always want to do as part of your volunteer policy is always use the rule of twos. And the rule of twos is 2 children and 2 adults together. That's the smallest group that you're allowed to put together. So if a child needs to go to the bathroom, it's great, no problem. I'll have this volunteer take this child to the bathroom. I'll call one of my security team members over to be the second adult, and I'll have little Susie go with her friend to make sure that we've got our rule of twos established. That just makes sure that if there's any allegations that come up, that you've got a lot of eyewitnesses that can kind of back up, hey, no, that actually didn't happen, or speak to what actually did occur. If there was an issue. So rule of twos is really a great way just to make sure that we got, again, lots of eyes on what's going on, and that there's no place to hide.
And I like your suggestion on leveraging your security team to help, because I know that's another question we get a lot, is we don't have enough people staffed within the classrooms to carry out the rule of twos. So what do we do? Mm-hmm. And so by utilizing that security team, you sort of meet those requirements without taking people out of the classrooms.
Yeah. Or you can have, if you don't have a security team, you can have an usher that can come out periodically and just double check, hey, does anybody need to go to the restroom, and team up again with another adult and at least 2 children to make that all happen. So there's a ton of other resources out there on volunteer policies. We're not even scratching the surface. This is just like 30,000 foot level.
Huge topic.
So a couple of different things to keep in mind. StopItNow.com is a great organization. They really focus on child abuse prevention and tips and tricks and ideas and policy boilerplates to actually kind of get you guys started in that right direction. So highly encourage you to go check out their website. You've got our blog that Angela, you write a lot of articles and post a lot of tips and tricks on our on the KidCheck blog, as well as do the child protection policy webinar. And you've spoken on that and done that webinar almost coast to coast now.
Yeah.
So it's something we've just been doing in the last year or so.
Last year. Well, it's a big topic, and now child protection policy is actually becoming a requirement for a lot of insurance companies. When they go to insure churches, they want to know that there is a child protection policy put in place, and also that it meets their requirements. And so churches now are having to step up and create these, which I know they can be laborious, but we try to take that pain out of it by offering this webinar and get people fast tracking to it so that they can get them started really quickly.
Yeah. So if you'd like more information on how to set up a child protection policy, though, just jump on our website and kind of figure out what the next scheduled webinar is and go check it out. So
there's a lot of information.
Yep. Okay, we're going to turn this over to Angela now, and talk about this is going to be a little bit of a heavier, deep dive topic, looking at kind of the predators within within the church organization and just within the world as abroad. Yeah. So,
and this, as Alex mentioned, this is a heavier topic, and there's a lot of information out there about predator profiling and learning about things. And the reason that I'm so passionate about this is because I really believe that in order for us to have safe and healthy children's ministries, there has to be, a level of healthy skepticism. That doesn't mean that we are advocating children's ministry directors work as if everyone is guilty until proven innocent. But what I do like to share is that I believe a healthy skepticism when you're put in charge of protecting children is really good. And I also believe that healthy skepticism coupled with the gifts of the Spirit is imperative for being able to protect children. So I can present all the information here to you that I can, but it's really my belief that the Holy Spirit has to really give you that wisdom in order to see things that you normally would not see with your own eyes and to hear things that you normally would not pay a second mind to. So with that said, let's talk about why churches. Why do offenders see Christians or churches as a good place to target? There is one woman that I follow quite frequently. Her name is Ann Salter. She's an American psychologist, and she comments that if children can be silenced and the average person is easy to fool, many offenders report that religious people are even easier to fool than most people. And so because of that, one statistic that we left off the initial slide is that over 90% of child predators identify with either religious or highly religious. And so it's something to keep in the back of your mind when you are talking to potential volunteers or you have people within your organizations that have been there for a long time. In the past, stranger danger has been a really big sort of training theology that we have pushed out there with children. But for today's purposes, we're really going to talk more along the lines of the safe adult and how predators work and how they establish themselves and things like that. I think it's really interesting. Anne shared a quote from a predator himself that said, Christians are generally speaking trusting folks. I consider church people easy to fool. They have a trust that comes from being Christians, and they tend to be better folks all around. They seem to want to trust the good that exists in people. I think they really want to believe in people, and because of that, you can easily convince with or without convincing words. That is an actual quote from an 8-time convicted child predator. So it sort of sets up where their mindset is. So let's talk a little bit today about 2 separate types of predators, and I'll just focus on one, we have the first one being a power predator. This is really a situation where they take the victim by force. They put themselves in situations where it's not easy to retreat or claim a misunderstanding. These types of predators or actions really aren't the top focus for churches. A good example of this would be the J.C. Dugard situation, where the girl was walking to school. They jumped out of the car, they tasered her. That's that's the classic example of a power predator, or a child being grabbed in a park or something like that. So they typically do not focus on churches. They don't concentrate in that area. The persuasive predator, however, is really what we find within churches. They are the individuals that tend to use their personality and charm to really gain trust and influence others. This gaining trust is something that they focus on. They work tirelessly to make people believe of essentially the facade that they're throwing out there. And they know that if they can keep their intentions hidden, that they can gain people's trust, they'll get access to more victims. So, and as I said in the slide, they wait just for the right time to strike. Now, the time thing is really interesting to me, because what the research has shown is that some predators will actually wait 2 to 3 years before they strike. And this shocked me, because I thought that with a persuasive predator there would be sort of an instant gratification that would occur. But truly that's not the case. If they bide their time, the longer they go, the more access they get to children, the more victims that they have. So a good example of this, I call it out on the slide, is a wolf in sheep's clothing. So that's kind of what we're going to be focusing on today. So we talk about sort of the personal characteristics, or what defines a predator. This is absolutely not an exhaustive list. There's a lot more to add on here, but these are the things that really stuck out to me, these characteristics. And one reason is because if you look at a lot of these things, naturally these are the moral characteristics that we gravitate towards in people. So if you are a children's ministry director and you're looking to bring on new volunteers or attract new volunteers, a lot of these things, a lot of these characteristics would be what you would look for. Responsible, deliberate, careful, kind, attentive, helpful. Those are things that we look for in volunteers. But I wanted to call out just a few because they're very special to this particular situation. Opportunistic. Predators are extremely opportunistic. If there is no policy put in place, if there are no background checks, if they can have access to children, they will find that opportunity. The other thing is they're highly intuitive. This really stunned me when I was listening to an interview with a convicted predator. And what he shared was that he could walk into a room with children, and within less than a minute, he could identify who his victims would be and who would accept his affection and who would not. They become masters at reading children, and they look for the most vulnerable, children who oftentimes are on the outskirts of the ministry, children who are more isolated, who are more reserved, pulled back, things like that. They become experts in figuring out who exactly will become their targets. So once again, take a look at this list, keep it in the back of your mind, and understand that they're highly intelligent, they're opportunistic, and they become extremely intuitive. With that said, I wanted to show a slide, and I wanted everyone to look at this slide and see. Obviously, there is a one who's been convicted on there up in the left-hand corner, or on the right-hand corner, I guess. And but I wanted everyone to really look at this slide and think to yourself, if I was looking at these people, who would naturally, I think, would be a predator? And it's really important because we don't have time today to tackle the assumptions that we hear all the time within church organizations about predators. But I wanted to give a visual representation as you look at these people and think in your own mind, oh, that guy looks shady. That guy, I don't know, he looks, pretty decent. So after looking at that, I want to go to the next slide and show you who actually is a convicted predator. surprisingly, they're all convicted predators. You have a couple of beauty queens. You have a woman who was a teacher. You have, obviously a Hollywood producer in there. You have a Harvard professor. So they come from all walks of life, is my point. They come from anywhere. So I wanted to make sure that that illustration was in your mind so that you can sort of set your assumptions aside and start to really look and learn about who the enemy is in terms of the predator. So how do they work? Obviously they work to infiltrate a group or community. We talked about how they do work tirelessly to earn trust and remove barriers. This is not just with children. It's always important to keep in mind that predators will also do what we call grooming families. So they will integrate into people's families. And this has been a real problem in terms of, children being, abused by people that they know, and that's really how they work to do that. They look for community or organizations that don't have policies, don't have barriers. There's not somebody looking over those children. They look for those opportunities once again. They work to gain access to the victims, the grooming process. And this often starts with very innocent behaviors, introductions, but as time goes on and the child becomes more comfortable with their interactions, they will increase, and they will increasingly provide affection, and they will watch to see how this child responds to that. Now, as the child receives affection, they transition to more risky behaviors. That may be a dirty joke, that may be a tickle game, that may be something along those lines. But the more risky the behaviors become, the more empowered the predators begin to feel. And once you get to that point, there's always a level of sexuality that's introduced. And that's where children, being children, they don't understand that. They don't understand that this is, this shouldn't be happening. So, and then that's when the abuse occurs. So that is a general overall overview of how predators, of how they work, how they think, and how they target groups. So protecting against them. We've talked throughout this presentation on child protection policy. I believe honestly that that's probably one of the #1 things that a children's ministry director can do. And when we talk about child protection policy, I'm not referring to just a document that sits in a filing cabinet. I'm referring to something that's actually a living, breathing, working training document that shares with people constantly what the expectations are. And if you take anything away from my presentation on predators today, the one thing I want you to always remember is the goal as a children's ministry director in protecting against predators is to reduce isolation and increase accountability. Anytime you're looking at protecting those in your ministry, that reducing isolation and increasing accountability should be your guidepost. That should be what you are looking to accomplish with every policy, with every working guideline. That is ultimately what you want to end with. You want to educate staff and train your volunteers. I know that trainings and those types of things can be difficult for people to attend. But we had one woman that gave a great suggestion. She said, I do a 10-minute standing meeting every Sunday. We review a policy, we talk about what it means. She defines clear boundaries for how volunteers should interact with children. And it just simply takes a 10-minute standing meeting.
That's great, yeah.
And then that way she hits a different policy every week and then she starts over again. That way, people who were there, the information is reiterated to them, and those that are new continue to get that training. The third thing is providing a secure check-in and check-out process. Of course, we come from the world of secure children's check-in, but I cannot tell you whether you're using a system like ours or it's a manual system. You need to have something in place when people are dropping off and retrieving children. You need to have a process in place that states these are the people that can have access to this child, and this is who cannot have access. It's imperative, so be aware. Watch over the children that are more vulnerable, children that you know are coming from backgrounds of divorce or prior abuse or things that make them more vulnerable and unsure and isolated, and those are the children that you really want to keep an eye on. And sometimes they're the children that act out the most. Those tend to be more targets for predators than a child who's well adjusted and participating and is a good communicator and things like that. The next thing is take children's comments and feedback seriously. Children say things all the time, whether it's in words or actions or drawing or interactions with other children. Whatever it is, you want to take their comments and feedback and their observations seriously. Children, I believe, they just have an innate ability to spot evil, and you want to make sure that you're really listening to them. Predators count on privacy. I mentioned that if you take one thing away from my time up here, it is to reduce isolation and increase accountability. They depend on that privacy. They depend on those points of isolation. That gives them an opportunity every time. Alex mentioned creating highly visible classrooms and utilizing your resources in your community. And one thing I do want to mention is that April is a National Child Abuse Prevention Month. This is a great time where there's so much information available for free to people who want to learn more about this. The month of April is really the time that a lot more people are talking about abuse prevention topics, and they're providing things and resources local to your, within your community. So it's really a good month to look at that. And then I think that is pretty much my, like I said, predators are a big topic. There's so many out there, and we just want to make sure you have the information that helps you to prevent. But having a protection policy and boundaries up can really go a lot to deterring.
It's something. It's a topic that, like, as believers, we always want to believe the best in people, and think about God's grace and what God has done for me, but we also need to, be wise as serpents, but as gentle as lambs. And so having that wisdom of knowing, okay, there are people out there that are up to no good. There are people out there that do want to take advantage of the kids in my care as a children's pastor. So, having that information and just kind of keeping your eyes open and just kind of using common sense, that is such a key thing to, overall security. So looking kind of at the keys to security, some of the things we've talked about today. One of the things you want to make sure that you don't do is as you develop policies and procedures, as you develop your overall security architecture that you want to have within your facility and within your ministry, make sure that when you have a policy in place that you don't ever make exceptions to that. Don't be afraid to tell a parent no. That's a hard thing. In fact, we had one time that I had a gal in my small group who I was working as security on the security team in the children's ministry area, and a gal in my small group who I know very, very well. I know her son very well. She lost her checkout badge or the checkout sticker, and needed to come back and pick up her son. Well, of course, she's a nurse. She just come off a 24-hour shift. She was exhausted. She just wanted to get out and go home. Our policy at the time said, like, okay, we need to go back to the check-in station. We need to pull up your account and verify that you're an authorized guardian for this child. And so I did that, and she was pretty upset at me for maintaining that policy. She's like, you know me, Alex. You know what's going on. You know my son Sam. Everything's okay. And I couldn't waver. I just can't, and it's not about her. It's about all the other parents that were watching, saying, right. Do they really actually care for my child? Are they actually going to follow through on the procedures and policies they have in place? And so we did get through the process. She did get home, and then the next week at our small group meeting, she actually came up to me and apologized and just said, like, I was exhausted, but she was very thankful that I was able to say no to her and right. follow our own policies and procedures.
There's so much comfort in that consistency,
absolutely,
especially as a parent.
Yeah, you got to remember, as a children's pastor, you are the one that is responsible for the safety of and security of those kids when they're in your care. So, when that one parent shows up that wants to throw a fit and, they want to try and take charge of a situation, that's a great time to get on the radio and call your security team over so that they can kind of head off the conflict, so you don't have to deal with it as much. But you got to remember that that parent that's throwing a fit, they're not in charge in that moment. Yes, you do have their child, and yes, you're going to keep their child safe no matter what, no matter how loud and obnoxious they get. But you are the one that's responsible for the safety of their child at that moment, not them. So when you're thinking about following the rules and procedures that you put in place, when you have that one parent that is poking you with the finger, you got to kind of put on the Simon Cowell persona and just be tough as nails and stick by the policy that you've created, and use common sense through the whole thing. So we're going to wrap this up. We're right at our hour mark here, and if you guys have questions about anything that we covered or things that we haven't covered, we're going to do a Q&A section here in just a second. But here's my contact information. This is my direct email. Feel free to send me an email, ask a question if you need to. I'll get it over to Angela as well. If something comes up after this is all over, or you need more clarification on something, feel free to just drop us a line and ask. We've talked to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of children's pastors all over the country and presented this information. We've heard a lot of different scenarios and different types of things that have gone on. Done consulting one-on-one with churches as well. So we're happy to share this information. It is something absolutely critical to your children's ministry.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Thanks again for joining us. We're going to go ahead and
thank you.
And open up for the Q&A. Matt, are you still there?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, guys, you have really taken us to school as it relates to improving our safety and security. We have a number of questions, but some of the things that really came to mind for me that I just want to reiterate from a scriptural standpoint as we weigh both the love that we have for people, right, and then also the discernment that God calls us to. And so a couple scriptures came to mind as I was listening to you guys. First, Philippians 1:9 from Paul. It's my prayer that your love may abound more and more with knowledge and all discernment. And so I would just encourage you with that as you're thinking through these policies and procedures within the life of your church. That was Paul's prayer. Love would abound more and more, but do so with knowledge and all discernment. And I think that kind of from a biblical standpoint supports all the things we've been talking about. As well, Hebrews chapter 5, verse 14. But solid food is for the mature, for those who have their powers of discernment trained by constant practice to distinguish good from evil. And so I think for children's ministry leaders, and I'm really proud of the many who joined us today for the webinar, you have chosen to be practicing, to be part of that constant practice of discernment so that you might distinguish good from evil. And that was important. That was critical to the life of the church there for the writer of Hebrews as he encouraged those. And for us as mature leaders in the church, we have to be in that constant practice. And so I think that's where this topic falls. And so just really appreciate your expertise, guys. We've talked about you've talked covered a ton of ground and talked a lot about some tools. I just want to reiterate some of those since that kind of talks to some of those questions that were asked. You talked about Protect My Ministry from a background check standpoint. Amazon as a place to find some of those signage, placards and things. I think we're going to share a link to one of those as well. Talked about KidCheck too as being a great tool. One question that was mentioned: do you have a recommended first aid kit that, or even a list of things, anything in the first aid kit piece? Because I know that was asked as well.
On Amazon, there's like thousands of first aid kits to choose from. I think.
Right.
I think you need to scale with the size of your ministry. If you have a small area, a small group, you could probably get by with some Bactine and some Band-Aids and just the basics. But as you have a larger and larger group of kids, or if they're all congregated together, you may want a larger, kind of more comprehensive first aid kit. Or if you're spread out a little bit more, you're going to want to have a whole bunch. So you can have a whole bunch of very small ones. So it really comes down to budget and the area that you're in, the size of your ministry. It's just going to depend on a lot of things. I don't have a recommended one specifically, but just get one from a reputable company.
Awesome. Hey, friends who have been chiming in throughout the chat. Thank you for all of the different comments. And Nancy had posted, just started out at the church, been amazed at our lack of security. Okay, I've been there in that place. Been a worry for me, but I think I'll get resistance for any changes that I want to make. From your expertise, how does someone get started? You know, how does someone take a first step with senior leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, you know, obviously if the challenge is that the senior staff of the church is going to be resistive to any idea of adding security, you know, so a couple of things to think about. The first one is that having an issue with a child from a predator or even a medical emergency within a children's ministry area, that's probably the fastest way to lose your church. If you don't do it right, because the parent gets upset, they sue somebody, or somebody gets convicted of something and there's a lawsuit. We had the church that my children went to preschool at, just up the street from our office here. They had an issue a couple years ago where a janitor attacked a young girl in the closet, and they actually lost the church. They had to, a whole other organization moved into their facility. So that continues to be ongoing litigation there. And that's, I mean, these things happen to other people in other places, right? This is the church that my kids went to preschool at. So that was kind of a big wake-up call for me as well. So when you're talking to your senior staff and the pastoral staff, you can't not iterate this enough just to say this is a big deal. This is one of the biggest deals because we have all of this responsibility. God is calling us to be, to care for these kids and love these kids spiritually, mentally and physically, and that covers all of those grounds. Yeah. So it's going to have to be, maybe a continual wake-up call process, but just to kind of keep at it, keep going with it.
And I would also add to that sometimes when you're just starting out, it's really helpful to find one advocate for you within the church. And perhaps, the wish would be on the leadership team. Mm-hmm. Find one person that you can have the conversation with of why you're doing what you're doing. Yeah. And, we really cover that in the Child Protection Policy webinar. We also talk about sort of putting your team together, whether it be one or two people that can help you to advocate for these changes for security. The other thing is we talk about how to have leadership conversations and being prepared with questions that they might have when they're talking to you about it. And so I really encourage people, if that's what you need to know, reach out to me and I can share those questions that you need to be prepared with, some tips for finding advocates, and tips for sort of building the momentum to help push you towards establishing more secure policies.
One of the things that, just to add in there, one of the things that I hear frequently, just involved with my involvement with KidCheck, is I get emails periodically from pastors saying, hey, I just had another family join the church because they were so impressed with the check-in process and how our church takes security seriously. And it allows a parent to drop off a child and then be able to totally focus on what's going on within the sanctuary because they feel a sense of peace about what's happening, that our kids are well cared for on all fronts.
And I know that you have mentioned, Alex, in other presentations that the best way to reach families is by protecting their children.
Yeah, absolutely.
You bet. One of the things, just along that topic, that I blogged about last week was, especially as we've just gone through the Easter, season within the church, and all the preparation for new families and for families who, may attend on occasion. One of the things that is a basic expectation from every family who walks in the door, especially those who are visiting, is that you will keep their child safe. Their child will be safe in your hands. And so I think from a leadership standpoint, I would encourage you to be looking to the Scripture. I always wanted to point my senior pastor to, hey, what's the Bible talk about this? And how can I bring that in? So I would encourage you to be searching out some of those things, as well as just that basic expectation that a family has as they walk in. You're going to keep their children safe. Absolutely. So, friends, I know we've had some other questions come up. I am so glad that the folks here at KidCheck, our dear friends and partners, offer additional resources on their website. Make sure that you check that out, KidCheck.com, and check out the different links that they've posted throughout the chat in terms of blog content. And I would encourage you to take part in their next webinar as well. I do want to announce the winner of Tweetable Leadership. But before I do that, let me just say a final thank you to Alex and Angela. Thank you guys so much for all that you brought today.
Absolutely.
You're very welcome. Thanks for the opportunity. We love getting this information out, and pray that if we can prevent one child or one ministry from having to have a situation, we feel like,
it's all worth
it's all worth it.
Absolutely. Well, just appreciate your investment in the community of children's and family ministry leaders here at INCM. And our winner today, by completely random assignment, is Nancy. So, Nancy, you are winning Tweetable Leadership, the signed copy from Jim Weidman, and you're going to love that. So, our team will connect with you on your email address so that we can get your shipping information, and expect this to come here sometime soon, right to your door. Thank you, everyone, so much for being part of today's webinar, for digging into this topic of improving child safety in your children's ministry. We love you guys, and consider coming back for more webinar stuff. We got tons of stuff going on each and every month, and we love to spend this time with you. So blessings on your ministry as you look to keep children safe as you are ministers of the gospel. Thanks, blessings, and have a great day.